because joining us on the phone is Congressman Steve King of Iowa, and we want to get to him right now. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Allison.
What did you just hear the president say?
Well, you have to interpret what you hear him say, and, wanting a big or a large or a massive border security deal, that doesn't address domestic enforcement. It doesn't really even tell us what the border security might be. And if we don't build a wall all the way through, then the rest of it is subject to prosecutorial discretion, his, as was under Barack Obama's, or the next president. So I think something's going to have to be reversed here with this president's policy, or it'll just blow up his base. I mean, this was a straight-up promise all the way through his campaign. And I might add that I've told the president that I market-tested his immigration policy for 14 years. And we spent a lot of time in Iowa having those debates and discussions, and then across New Hampshire, South Carolina, and beyond. I don't think it's unclear to anybody what those campaign promises were, but it looks to me like he's preparing to keep Hillary Clinton's campaign promise rather than his own.
Here's what the president says about that wall in a tweet this morning, Congressman. The wall, which is already under construction in the form of new renovation of old and existing fences and walls, will continue to be built. Was that your understanding of what a wall means?
Well, not at all. I mean, this sounds like, I had an old jalopy and I was going to buy you a new car, but now I'm going to overhaul the jalopy. No, it was a wall. It was a wall all the way. And people are trying to redefine that term wall and say it's virtual wall, it's vibration sensors, it's drones, it's balloons, or it's fence. A wall is a wall, and the American people know that. And by the way, it is cheap to build a wall in comparison to the good we get out of it, and we need it for a lot of reasons. And on top of that, I've drilled into this with the administration, and I've been trying to identify who's the walls are under the Trump administration. I can't find that person. I sat down with General Kelly before he moved to Chief of Staff, and I got some referrals and some answers, and I think he's a tremendous, great American, but I didn't get insight into the wall.
And, but just so I understand, meaning you've tried to identify who in the administration is for the wall or against the wall, or both?
I'm trying to identify who President Trump's individual or individuals are who actually have a plan and a strategy that they can explain to me.
And you've not found one?
I haven't found any. Pardon me?
And you've not found one of those people?
I've not found one, and I've drilled deeply. And I've had promises that they would come to me, and I can't get those answers. So, I want to see the plans. I want to see what plans have been approved. They had competition between multiple contractors. They approved a small number of contractors to build prototypes, and this thing is stalled because somebody complained, is what the best I know. But I've not looked anybody in the eye that is part of the administration that can say, here's what we're doing, here's our plan, here's the progress so far, and here are the proposals that have come forward. If they don't have, one person doesn't have that in their head, there is no commander of the wall, and I don't know how it gets done if you're going to trust a committee that's just not cohesive and doesn't seem to know what each other are doing.
Congressman, what do you think of the president hatching these deals with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi?
Well, first, I think it's appropriate for a president to speak with the leaders of both parties. That's fine, and it should happen. I do think that maybe Nancy Pelosi hijacked the message a little bit, and the president has to walk it back. I'll bet that's what's going on to a degree. And that's why I said
but hold on a second, in terms of the message, because the president, you just heard him speak there, I mean, he once again reiterated that he wants some sort of solution for the 800,000 dreamers that he just said again, through no fault of their own, was brought here. So it doesn't sound like, I mean, these are his words. He's tweeted as such this morning. So it doesn't sound like he's following Nancy Pelosi's lead. I mean, this is how he feels.
Well, and they did walk it back some, but I concede your point, Allison, on that. And he also said that he and Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell agree on Dreamers, and 92% agree on that. I think that's his favorite number. I remember him using that number also when we were discussing the health care issue on a totally different thing. So, no, I don't think 92% agree on this at all. I'd say about 80% of his base agree with me that we cannot reward lawbreakers. If we do that, then we get more lawbreakers. And here's the irony out here is that in '86, Ronald Reagan led with amnesty. And in about 2006, Bush 43 led with amnesty. The Obama administration and the Gang of Eight led with amnesty in 2013. Every one of those initiatives failed because the American people know we need enforcement. And if you give amnesty first with the promise of enforcement second, you got what Bush 41 got when he said no new taxes, read my lips. He got the taxes and not the spending cuts. You've got to have the important things up front and then have the honor to follow through if you're going to make the deal if amnesty comes later. That doesn't come from me. I've worked for 30 years to restore the respect for the rule of law, especially with regard to immigration. And we were on the cusp of doing that until the Trump announcement the other day on DACA. And now it looks to me like things are going downhill pretty fast, and we'd better put it back together, or the Republicans will be done in 2018 and 2020.
Congressman, what does this mean for the Republican Party? If the president protects the Dreamers or has a deal with Pelosi and Schumer to protect the Dreamers, and the wall that he promised really is refurbishing old fences?
Well, what it means is the debate will leave him. They won't be able to defend him anymore. And you know, I feel this ringing back to me. There's a strong message, and I'm talking about my constituents in Iowa who will say, you need to be behind Trump. I am. I support his entire agenda. The planks for the platform, I was part of putting them together. Even though I was Cruz's national co-chairman, when Cruz dropped out, I transitioned over to Trump, and I've been a solid Trump supporter all along. And I'll say today, I support Donald Trump's campaign agenda. I support the agenda that he had when he was sworn into office, and I support almost every piece of the rest of his agenda except this amnesty piece that's being dangled out in front of America right now. And that's so destructive to a first world country that if you do not have the rule of law or respect for that law, then the people that are writing our immigration laws are the people that are breaking them. And we had a protest day before yesterday here in the Capitol, Dreamers coming out demanding that we give them amnesty. Well, what do lawbreakers have? What right do they have to make demands of the duly elected officials from the citizens of the United States of America? They should, if anything, they ought to be at least pleading for it, not demanding.
Congressman, what does this mean, though, for the Republican Party? We've heard it described in some quarters as possible civil war. If you feel as adamantly as you're describing, but yet Mitch McConnell and Speaker Ryan are going to go along with whatever deal comes up, what does that mean for the future of the Republican Party?
Well, I hope that we can somehow walk through this without another change in leadership in the way that it took place with John Boehner. But I would remind people that, you know, John Boehner understood in 2013 that if he brought amnesty to the floor of the House of Representatives, that would be the end of his speakership. And he didn't bring it to the floor, I believe, primarily for that reason. He still lost his speakership over that kind of leadership. And so at this point, there is a personal loyalty towards Paul Ryan. I sat and talked with him yesterday. I like him. I respect him. His word's been good to me. But this is a precarious place to force-feed amnesty when all of history says that's a classical mistake. I would ask people, talk to Ed Meese III, our former Attorney General under Ronald Reagan. He was there when they encouraged Reagan to sign amnesty. He regrets they did, and Reagan regretted his signature because the American people do have a love and respect for the rule of law. And I've said that, you know, there are a number of the Dreamers I like a lot. There's one that I would adopt to keep that individual in the United States if that was what would be a good move. But I like them a lot. But I love the rule of law. And we can't have both a reward for lawbreakers and the rule of law. They're contradictory to each other. They're incompatible. They're oil and water. And a civilized nation has to embrace the rule of law. And by the way, every other country in the world wouldn't be having a decision on whether they were going to grant amnesty. And I don't know how this got into the heads of the American people as deeply as it did. Yes, there are young children that have been brought in here by their parents due to no fault of their own. And yes, they're good people. And I know a fair number of them. I live in the middle of a very highly very high concentrations of minority populations just north and south of me. So I'm not out of connection with this at all.
Yeah.
But there were also many that came in at age 14, 15, 16, and 17. And we know that, I mean, I've been there to watch as they came across the border smuggling drugs into America. And there's not a distinction between the kids I've described in the secondary component of this and the first component of it with regard to DACA law.
I mean, you're saying there's no, it's always tough when you make these statements because you're saying there's no distinction between the drug smugglers and the kids who were brought here by no fault of their own as minors. I mean, of course there's a distinction.
Allison, I'm saying that no distinction within the DACA language that's out there. They don't differentiate between them.
But they've already said that criminals will be deported. I mean, that is the policy.
Yeah, but, you know, technically every one of them is a criminal. So their language is, you know, it is, I don't know if it's intended to obfuscate this issue, but whoever crossed the border illegally, you know, they, of course, need to be found guilty of it, but whoever crossed the border illegally has committed the crime of unlawful entry.
But, Congressman, here's what I want to ask you. If you no longer support, if the president did make this deal, and then you no longer support his agenda, and this morning we're seeing headlines on Breitbart that are quite critical of any possible deal like this. We're seeing Ann Coulter tweet about this. We're seeing Sean Hannity. What does that mean for the president if he loses all of you, his most stalwart base?
Well, Allison, you know, from all of this for me, it's never been personal. I have supported the president's agenda, and I've been I'll say a significant part in helping to put those planks into our platform all along, clear back in Iowa and throughout. So if this thing collapses and they roll over the top of me with amnesty and the rule of law is destroyed and my life's work is tossed over the side, all the rest of that agenda that I believe in, I'm going to work to try to get past anyway in the best way we can. So that's what it means to me.
I hear you. So specifically, what would that be? You would work against the president. What would that look like?
Well, I want the full 100% repeal of Obamacare, and there are some fixes I'd like to put in place in the aftermath of that. I want tax reform, and I want to have corporate income tax relief. I want to have repatriation of the trillions of dollars that are stranded overseas because of tax limitations. I want to address the death tax. These are components along the way that I'm absolutely for. I mean, it's my legislation that is sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk that is the tort reform for medical malpractice. There are many, many things that we agree on, and the deregulation that he's been aggressive on. So, you know, I just have to come to grips with this is frustrating. Maybe we can save it. Whether we can or whether we can't, all of us should be working for the best agenda that we believe in, and we can't be deciding we're against somebody because we disagree with them or disagree with the move they make. We've got to be for the agenda we believe in and against the agenda we oppose, and somehow the hand of God might steer us in the right direction.